In a single night, Mia Carter surrendered to a whirlwind passion and kept a secret that would change the course of her life. Pregnant with quadruplets, she discovers that the father is a powerful CEO embroiled in corporate battles. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Mia Carter walked briskly through the hospital lobby, her mind tangled in half-formed thoughts. It was her first official day as the new chief of pediatrics, and she felt the weight of expectations pressing on her shoulders. The morning rush swirled around her, nurses exchanging shift updates, a receptionist greeting anxious parents, the steady squeak of gurney wheels down the hallway. Mia forced her lips into a polite smile as she passed familiar faces. She didn't want anyone guessing she'd spent the entire night battling nerves and a churning stomach. One of the senior residents, dressed in a crisp white coat, offered a quick, "Congratulations, Dr. Carter," as she hurried by, his tone warm but his eyes brimming with curiosity. Mia smiled back in acknowledgement, hoping the color in her cheeks could be attributed to excitement rather than anything else. The staff around her seemed genuinely pleased that she had earned this promotion, and she wished she felt the same clarity of purpose. Deep inside, her anxiety flickered like a fault line, threatening to crack open at any moment. Her mind drifted to a moment 3 weeks ago. She was in a dimly lit Manhattan lounge, nursing a single cocktail, perched on a velvet seat. In that memory, the music was sultry and low, the hum of nightlife running beneath her pulse. She had been taking a rare night off from her duties at the hospital, celebrating a friend's birthday. That was when a man, tall and undeniably magnetic, appeared at her side. She remembered the confidence in his eyes and how her pulse quickened the second he introduced himself. Ethan. No last name, just Ethan. It had been a spark of excitement she hadn't felt in years. Even now, the memory made her stomach tighten, a rush of heat rushing to her chest. Today, though, that memory came with a reminder of why she'd spent the last 2 weeks trying not to throw up in the staff restroom. A wave of queasiness swept over her. She pressed her lips together and tried to breathe. Not now, she thought. Not on my first day. "Mia, wait up!" Dr. Lucy Morales called from behind, her sneakers scuffing the floor as she caught up with Mia's quick pace. A pediatric surgeon with a bright laugh and endless energy, Lucy had been Mia's closest friend since their residency. "Hey, boss lady," Lucy teased, adjusting her surgical cap. "You look a little pale. You okay?" Mia nodded too fast, swallowing hard to keep her stomach in check. "I'm fine, just nerves," she answered, trying to sound casual. "It's a big day." Lucy peered at her with playful suspicion. "Sure, if that's what you want to call it. Just remember to eat something, or you'll be the first chief to pass out on rounds." Before Mia could respond, a wave of nausea forced her to lift a hand in apology and slip into the nearest restroom. She managed to compose herself over the sink, cheeks burning at the thought of how Lucy would interpret her hasty retreat. But there was no way around it. The pregnancy was inescapable now, and she hadn't dared tell a soul. When she emerged, Lucy offered her a bottled water and asked no questions. Mia sighed in gratitude, taking a slow sip. The two then headed toward the pediatric wing, the colorful murals of animals and bright shapes on the walls lending the space a cheerful tone that almost steadied Mia's rattled nerves. Standing in the central ward, Mia felt her shoulders relax just a bit. Here, among the hum of IV pumps and the chatter of nurses comforting small children, she was in her element. A sobbing toddler with a cast on his leg caught her attention. She knelt down, introduced herself with a soft smile, and asked about his brave leg. Her patience, her gentleness, these were the qualities that had earned her the promotion. Everyone in the room felt the warmth in her voice as she distracted the child from his pain. Yet despite the sweet moments, her mind kept drifting back to that single night in Manhattan. She remembered the gentle pressure of Ethan's hand guiding her onto the dance floor. She remembered laughter shared between two strangers, the taste of champagne, and the flicker in his eyes that promised something beyond fleeting. How foolish she felt now, grappling with the consequences of an encounter she couldn't even fully regret. Not when she still felt echoes of how alive she had felt by his side. By midday, the hospital director, a wiry man with thinning hair, sought her out. "Mia, sorry, Dr. Carter," he began, correcting himself as though newly conscious of her title. "We're all proud of you. The board knows you'll bring great results. Keep me updated, especially on any critical pediatric cases that might need extra resources." He spoke briskly, clearly juggling a dozen tasks at once. Mia thanked him, discreetly masking her exhaustion. The scenario weighed on her. Not only was she the new chief, she was a pregnant one. And the father was a man whose full name she hadn't even known until she did a little research after that night. The pounding in her head grew more insistent. She realized it was a combination of hunger, stress, and the swirl of hormones that had become her constant companion. When Lucy found her between patient charts, she cracked a small joke about how Dr. Carter sounded so official, reminding Mia of the days when they would collapse together at the end of a grueling shift during residency. Mia managed a thin smile, grateful for a lifeline of normalcy. Lucy studied her closely. "You sure everything's okay? I'm used to seeing you bounce around with energy, but you look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." "I'm fine, Lucy," Mia repeated, a touch more firmly. "Really?" The day stretched on. A critical case in the late afternoon demanded Mia's attention. A 5-year-old with a complex heart condition. She guided the pediatric team through analyzing the child's vitals, ordering tests, and mapping out a care plan. Amid the swirl of consultations, she felt a brief wave of pride. Despite her inner turmoil, she was doing her job. She was saving lives, or at least guiding the process. By the time the sun dipped below the city skyline, Mia had stayed past her shift, her legs protesting the long hours. The corridors had emptied to a hush, broken only by the distant hum of machines and the occasional squeak of a supply cart. She found herself alone in her office, the overhead light casting a tired glow on the paperwork scattered across her desk. Outside, headlights traced thin beams along the windows, reminding her of nights spent drifting between work and home, always too busy for anything else. And yet that one night, she couldn't stop replaying it. The lounge, the low music, the golden light catching in Ethan's hair as he leaned close enough to whisper into her ear. She set aside a stack of forms about budget allocations for the pediatric ward. Instead, she pulled her phone from her pocket. With a trembling thumb, she typed "symptoms of multiple pregnancy" into the search bar. The lines of text blurred in front of her, detailing morning sickness, rapid weight gain, heightened fatigue. Worry pressed a knot at the base of her spine. She had an appointment tomorrow morning, the same one she'd been avoiding. She had confirmed it last week, praying that the blood tests were wrong, that maybe it was just her imagination. But every day she felt the truth more keenly. A gentle knock made her look up. Lucy stood at the door, her expression concerned but gentle. "Mia, you haven't gone home yet?" "Just finishing up." Mia quickly clicked off her phone's screen and tried to smile. She mustered a casual shrug, but Lucy's gaze flicked down to Mia's hand resting on her stomach. Mia jerked it away, heat flashing across her face. Lucy pressed her lips together as though weighing whether to say something. Finally, she just said, "Try not to overwork yourself, okay? You've been a rock star today, but even rock stars need to rest." She gave a short laugh that still managed to carry plenty of compassion. Mia nodded, waiting until Lucy's footsteps receded down the hall before slumping into her office chair. Slowly, she let out a long breath, feeling the tension start to shrink just a little. It was time to accept that everything in her life was about to change. She couldn't keep this secret forever, not when her health and the health of the child or children her mind insisted depended on careful monitoring. Perhaps she would find the courage to tell Lucy soon. Right now, though, she barely had the courage to face tomorrow's ultrasound. Gathering her things, she stood and turned off the lamp on her desk. In the glow of the city lights shining through the window, She paused. She needed to do this alone for just a little longer. She needed to stand on her own feet, for her patients, for herself, and for the new life she was carrying. There was no telling how it would unfold, or how the father, Ethan, would react if she ever found a way to contact him. But she knew one thing. She had to keep moving forward. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out and squinted at the screen in the dim light. It was a reminder from the clinic. In simple black letters, it read, "First ultrasound appointment, 9 a.m. tomorrow." A tremor ran through her, as though she were standing on the brink of a vast unknown. She took a shaky breath, her heart pounding. Tucking the phone away, she closed the office door behind her, fully aware that when tomorrow came, nothing would ever be the same again. She exhales shakily, realizing her life is about to change forever. Mia awoke the next morning with a gnawing mix of anticipation and dread. The beeping alarm on her phone reminded her of her ultrasound appointment, 9 a.m. sharp. She had barely slept, and her reflection in the bathroom mirror showed dark circles under her eyes. As she splashed cool water on her face, her thoughts spiraled. Today, all the quiet suspicions would be confirmed, but a small part of her still clung to the hope that maybe she had overreacted, that maybe things weren't so complicated. She arrived at the clinic with minutes to spare, checking in at the front desk. The place buzzed with its usual energy, couples waiting, excited parents with toddlers in tow, and pregnant women flipping through magazines that touted maternity tips. Mia stayed away from the magazines. She hadn't told anyone she was pregnant, and she certainly wasn't eager to pick up a glossy page about baby names or nursery decor, not when every step she took felt like it trembled with the unknown. When her name was finally called, she followed a cheerful nurse through a narrow corridor into a small ultrasound room. The gray walls and soft glow of the fluorescent light brought a sense of confinement. Her heart pounded so loudly that the nurse's friendly chatter sounded distant, like an echo in a long tunnel. Mia managed a smile when the nurse asked how she was feeling. "Just nervous," she admitted, lying on the examination table. The nurse nodded, setting up the machine. "It's normal. We'll take a look, see how everything's going, and the doctor will be right in." Warm gel touched Mia's abdomen, startling her despite the nurse's earlier warning. She inhaled deeply, gaze locking on the monitor as the ultrasound wand pressed against her skin. Dark, shifting images flickered into view. At first, Mia couldn't make sense of the shapes, but the nurse's eyes widened in clear surprise. Within moments, the doctor entered, examining the screen with a thoughtful frown. Silence filled the room, punctuated only by the hushed static of the machine. Mia's breath caught. Something was definitely happening. She just wasn't sure what. Then the doctor confirmed what the nurse had apparently spotted. 4 distinct, tiny heartbeats, flickering like little lights in a vast darkness. "Congratulations," the doctor said, voice firm but kind. "You're carrying quadruplets." A wave of shock traveled from Mia's head to her toes. She blinked, struggling to form a coherent thought. Are you sure?" she whispered. The doctor pointed to the screen, outlining the shapes. There was no denying it. 4 tiny, pulsing beings, each one apparently healthy but also turning Mia's entire reality upside down. The doctor explained that it was a high-risk pregnancy, that she would need specialized appointments, close monitoring, and very possibly a reduced workload. The words blurred in her ears. She nodded mechanically, barely able to grasp the implications. After the exam concluded, Mia found herself sitting in the same chair, a stack of ultrasound prints in her shaking hands. There was no escaping it anymore. She sat there long enough that the clinic receptionist peeked in, gently asking if she was okay. Mia forced a quick nod and left the clinic, feeling as though she were walking on unsteady ground. She arrived at the hospital just after noon, covering her shock with a veneer of calm professionalism. She had responsibilities to attend to, including a meeting about patient intake procedures with a few department heads. Her new position as chief of pediatrics demanded that she show confidence in her decisions, even if her knees felt ready to give out beneath her. Lucy found her right outside the conference room. "Hey, I was looking for you," Lucy said, eyebrows pinched with concern. "Everything all right? You missed our usual morning check-in." Mia's stomach fluttered again, but she nodded. "I just had an appointment." Lucy's eyes flickered with curiosity, but she chose to focus on the meeting that was about to start. Together, they stepped into the conference room, taking seats among a handful of administrators. Charts and diagrams covered the walls, detailing expansions in pediatric care. Mia forced her gaze to the center of the table where a projector displayed slides about philanthropic opportunities, funding programs, potential donors, and new alliances. One of the slides bore a familiar name, Harrington Conglomerate. Her pulse jerked in her chest. She felt Lucy's sideways glance and quickly turned to the next slide. The memory of Ethan, his easy smile, the sound of his laughter against the backdrop of soft lounge music, surged forward. She tried to push it aside. So what if his name was Harrington? It might not even be the same man. She pretended to listen intently as the hospital director explained that the Harrington conglomerate would soon send a representative to discuss joint investment in pediatric wards. When the meeting wrapped up, Lucy snagged Mia by the elbow in the corridor. "You look rattled," she said softly. "Did something in there bother you?" Mia thought about how to answer. Could she tell Lucy the truth? That she'd just discovered she was carrying quadruplets? That her mind kept jumping to a stranger named Ethan from a dimly lit lounge, who might or might not be this wealthy CEO? She shook her head, wanting to keep things close to her chest a little longer. "No, I'm fine," she repeated, voice hollow. Lucy gave her a doubtful frown. "If you say so," she responded, then moved aside to let Mia pass. Mia could feel Lucy's watchful eyes as she hurried down the corridor, wanting a moment alone to think. She found refuge in her office, shutting the door behind her. The ultrasound prints, still in her purse, felt like a secret weight she couldn't escape. She dug them out, quietly studying the ghostly images of those 4 tiny silhouettes. Emotion rose within her, a tangled mix of awe and terror. She remembered how the doctor's words had rung in her ears. Quadruplets, high-risk pregnancy, specialized care, potential bed rest. How could she balance all of that with her demanding job? She closed her eyes, pushing back tears. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of the spiral. She glanced at the screen. The hospital's OB/GYN nurse leaving a brief voicemail about follow-up appointments. She could hear the gentle concern in the nurse's voice, reminding her of the importance of immediate prenatal care. Mia's throat tightened. She texted back a quick thanks and set her phone aside, rubbing her forehead. No matter how big this felt, she had to keep moving. By late afternoon, she attempted to bury herself in the mundane tasks of leadership, overseeing scheduling for the pediatric staff, approving supply orders, meeting with a group of interns to discuss protocol. Despite her efforts, the fatigue overwhelmed her around every corner. She excused herself at one point, retreating to the restroom to rest her forehead against the cool tiles. She whispered to herself that she would find a way through somehow. When she emerged, Lucy was outside pretending to read a notice board. Their eyes locked and Lucy's expression softened with sympathy. Mia looked away, guilt creeping over her. Lucy was her best friend. She deserved honesty, but every time Mia tried to open her mouth, the words stuck. She wasn't ready for the questions, the pity, the curiosity about who the father was. She made it through the rest of the day, fighting exhaustion and nausea. By the time she finally packed up her paperwork, the sun was already dipping behind the city skyline, painting the windows with golden light. The hospital halls grew quieter, the wave of visitors and staff thinning to a gentler hum. Mia took the elevator to the ground floor, determined to slip out without further conversation. Her mind replayed the day's events, her new responsibilities, the Harrington conglomerate's potential involvement, the doctor's warnings about carrying 4 babies. Outside, The early evening air felt heavy with the promise of rain. She paused on the sidewalk, letting the city's steady pulse surround her. The tension in her body longed for release. For a second, she considered calling Lucy, inviting her out for a coffee and finally blurting out the truth. But as she reached into her purse for her phone, it vibrated with an incoming message. She brought it to eye level under the street lamp's glow. The sender was unknown. Her brow furrowed as she opened the text. It read, "Meeting scheduled. Ethan Harrington, CEO, next week at your hospital. Details attached." She reread the words, her heart skittering in her chest. Ethan Harrington. It was right there in plain text. Could it really be the same mysterious man who had swept her off her feet that night in Manhattan? She stared at the message until headlights from a passing car snapped her out of her trance. If it was him, their paths were about to cross in the most unexpected and complicated way possible. The drumming of her pulse filled her ears, the magnitude of this coincidence sending a thrill of panic and excitement through her. She took a trembling breath. Perhaps it wasn't a coincidence at all. Perhaps it was fate tipping its hand, forcing her to face the reality of what happened between them, and what was happening inside her now. She couldn't tear her eyes from the text. Next week, Ethan Harrington, a meeting at her hospital. Her baby's father, if her suspicions were correct, was about to walk straight into her professional domain. Anxiety and hope tangled together in her throat. She held the phone close, feeling a sudden rush of adrenaline that left her both unsteady and oddly resolved. A faint drizzle began to fall, speckling her coat. She hurried home, mind racing with questions, fears, and a tiny flicker of anticipation. Tomorrow, she would have to step back into the hospital with this knowledge. She would have to hold her head high, keep her secret for a little longer, and find a way to navigate a future she could never have scripted for herself. As she reached her front door, the message remained in her thoughts, echoing like an invitation she hadn't decided whether to accept or dread. Mia's heart thudded. Could this be the same Ethan? Mia receives a text from an unknown number. It's a snippet of data about a meeting with Ethan Harrington, CEO, at her hospital next week. Her heart skips. Could this be the same Ethan? Mia woke with her phone clutched in one hand, the early morning light barely creeping through the curtains. She blinked hard, remembering the sudden text she had read the night before about an upcoming meeting with Ethan Harrington. Her heart thumped at the possibility that this was the same man who had captivated her in a single dazzling evening, a memory that now weighed on her every waking moment. For a few seconds, she lay still in bed, thinking about what she had learned from the ultrasound just a day earlier. 4 heartbeats, 4 lives growing inside her, demanding more courage than she felt she possessed, and the father might be far more involved in her professional life than she'd ever imagined. She forced herself up, determined to face whatever lay ahead. There was no time to linger on what-ifs. The hospital needed its new chief of pediatrics, and she'd worked too hard to let personal worries overshadow her responsibilities. Yet the thought of being anywhere near Ethan Harrington, if indeed it was him, sent little jolts of anxiety racing through her. As soon as she arrived at the hospital, Mia ducked into the break room to snag a quick cup of water. Lucy, ever watchful, slipped in almost immediately. "You're here early," Lucy remarked, folding her arms. "Any particular reason? Or did you just want a head start on the madness?" Mia eyed her friend, torn between the urge to confide and the need to protect her secret a little longer. "I woke up early," she replied, shrugging. "Couldn't sleep." Lucy studied her in silence, then sighed, dropping her voice. "Mia, I'm your best friend. I know something's up. Are you pregnant?" Mia's heartbeat slammed in her ears. She hated lying, especially to Lucy. "No," she said too quickly. "I'm just handling some personal stuff. It's nothing. I promise I'm fine." Lucy pursed her lips but said nothing more. That small flicker of doubt in her eyes was enough to tell Mia that Lucy wasn't convinced. Still, the conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. A nurse poked her head in, telling them there was a new patient in the pediatric ward needing immediate attention. Mia hurried off, grateful for the reprieve from Lucy's questions. Entering the busy lobby, Mia came to a sudden stop. A tall man with salt and pepper hair was stepping through the automatic doors, followed by a small entourage in business attire. The tension in the air around them was unmistakable. Doctors and administrative staff stole quick glances, nurses murmured among themselves. Mia realized with a jolt that this must be Travis Caldwell, the influential shareholder rumored to have a history of corporate power plays. He stood scanning the hospital walls with an unhurried air, as if waiting for someone to acknowledge him. The director, half bowing, approached Travis with a polite handshake. Mia slipped to the side, hoping to avoid notice. But in the next moment, Travis's eyes landed on her with unsettling precision. Something in his gaze felt predatory, and she sensed an unspoken challenge there. She tried to walk past quietly, but Travis stepped into her path, his practiced smile only thinly veiling whatever lay behind it. "Dr. Carter," he said, voice cordial yet edged with meaning. "I've been hearing a lot about you. Newly appointed chief of pediatrics, correct?" Mia nodded. "Yes, sir." Travis folded his hands, expression turning almost conspiratorial. "Quite an achievement. I understand you'll be part of the upcoming discussions with Harrington Conglomerate. I'm sure you have insight into how that partnership might unfold." Mia felt her chest tighten. The mention of Harrington unnerved her. "I do my best to keep the pediatric wing running smoothly," she answered. "But as for those discussions, I'm not personally involved." A hint of amusement touched Travis's mouth. "Right," he drawled. "If that's the stance you want to take. Word has it you're quite passionate about your patients. Perhaps there's more to this connection with Harrington than meets the eye. I'm not sure what you're getting at." Her voice held steady, though her pulse raced. He stepped closer, forcing her to look up. "Let's just say that if you become too entangled with Ethan Harrington, it might draw attention to this hospital. Not all attention is good, Dr. Carter." Mia swallowed hard, refusing to show fear. "My only concern is the welfare of the children in my care." "Of course, I'm sure it is." Travis offered a parting nod, then moved on, leaving her standing there with a swirl of dread in her stomach. She told herself he was just fishing for leverage, but it unsettled her deeply that he could already be hinting at a personal link between her and Ethan. She shook off the encounter and tried to refocus. A child in the emergency room needed her. Racing past the triage area, she found Lucy hovering near a boy who clutched his abdomen in pain. The boy's mother stood nearby, frantic. Mia calmly took charge, issuing instructions to the nurses for tests, gently reassuring the mother that they would do everything possible. In those minutes, all her energy went to saving that little boy. The grim satisfaction of performing well under pressure steadied her, reminding her of the dedication that had led her to this point. While Mia and Lucy consulted a surgeon about the boy's possible appendicitis, Mia noticed Travis lingering at the edge of the hallway. He seemed to be observing everything she did, scribbling notes in a slim notebook. A jolt of protective anger stirred in her. Her role here was about healing children, not being a pawn in some corporate game of cat and mouse. But ignoring him was the best she could do. She had to trust that her work would speak for itself. After ensuring the boy was stabilized, Mia retreated to her office, feeling a wave of nausea that she could no longer ignore. She closed the blinds and pressed a hand over her mouth, waiting out the dizziness. Her stomach lurched painfully, and she felt panic fluttering in her chest. If only she could lie down for a moment. If only she had someone to confide in freely. With shaky hands, she rummaged in her desk drawer for some anti-nausea sweets she'd bought a few days before. A light tap sounded at the door. Lucy walked in, her gaze sweeping over Mia's pale face. "Mia, are you—" Travis poked his head in before Lucy could finish, his voice cutting through the office. "Dr. Carter, mind if I interrupt?" Lucy stood taller, shoulders squared. "What do you want, Mr. Caldwell?" Travis offered a thin smile. Just a word. I was noticing how thoroughly dedicated Dr. Carter is. It would be a shame if an outside distraction, say a certain philanthropic CEO, slowed her momentum. We're all very proud of her position here, after all. Mia's hand tightened around the edge of her desk. I appreciate your concern, but I have patients to attend to. If there's nothing else? Travis's silence spoke volumes. He let his gaze linger on Mia as though to say he'd be watching. Then he politely excused himself, leaving the office. Lucy spun around, eyes narrowed. Okay, that was beyond weird. What's going on? Mia had no energy left for pretense, but she also couldn't reveal everything. He's fishing for something. Seems to think I have a personal connection with Ethan Harrington. Lucy's jaw dropped. Do you? Mia opened her mouth, then paused. If she told Lucy about Ethan, she would have to explain the pregnancy. The enormity of it all weighed on her. Not in the way he thinks, she whispered, hoping Lucy would let it drop. Lucy hesitated, then spoke softly. Mia, if you're in any sort of trouble— I'm not, Mia insisted. I'll handle Travis. I won't let him ruin what I've worked for. Lucy studied her friend's face, clearly unconvinced. Yet she knew Mia well enough not to press further in that moment. Just promise you'll let me help if it gets too much. You're not alone. Mia forced a shaky smile. I know. As the day wore on, she clung to that thought. It did help to realize Lucy was there, even if Mia couldn't yet voice the whole truth. Eventually, the pediatric emergency calmed down, and Mia found a rare moment at her desk. She breathed deeply, trying to steady herself for another wave of uncertainty. On her screen, an internal document pinged her attention, a philanthropic proposal from the Harrington conglomerate. She scrolled through the details, half expecting to see a photograph of Ethan. There was no picture, but the phrasing, the tone, everything sounded like something he would champion. The synergy between healthcare and philanthropic funding was exactly the kind of passion he'd hinted at the night they met. Her heart felt caught in an ever-tightening vice. If this was indeed her Ethan, how was she supposed to hide the truth forever? Her eyes drifted to the ultrasound images tucked in a folder in the corner of her desk. 4 lives, so fragile, depended on her clarity now. Later, the fluorescent lights in the corridor flickered on as evening approached, staff heading off in smaller numbers. Mia prepared to leave, mind racing with all that had happened. She was haunted by Travis's words, by Lucy's worried face, by her own swirling emotions, and overshadowing it all was the knowledge that the father of her children could appear at any moment, offering answers or bringing more questions than she could handle. She shut down her computer, stepping out into the hall. A cluster of nurses whispered excitedly, pointing at an email on their phones. Curiosity tugged at Mia. She checked her inbox and found the same subject line blinking at her. A hospital-wide email read, Ethan Harrington's official visit confirmed for Monday morning. Mia's heart pounded, less than a week away. Monday morning arrived in a whirl of nerves and hurried footsteps. By sunrise, the hospital was already buzzing, as if the air itself hummed with anticipation. Everyone seemed to be preparing for the grand arrival of Ethan Harrington. Word had spread quickly that this philanthropic CEO had a significant interest in partnering with the hospital, especially in the pediatric ward. Mia sensed the tension escalating with each passing minute. People fussed about fresh coffee in the conference rooms, double-checked signage for visitors, and whispered about Ethan's rumored charm and business acumen. Mia took a slow breath, trying to steady her heart. She stood near the main foyer, where a sea of staff members gathered to catch a glimpse of the influential visitor. Her eyes flitted toward the large windows, catching sight of a sleek black car rolling up to the curb. Cameras flashed from a cluster of local news reporters hoping for a statement or even a quick photo. As the car door opened, uniformed security guards stepped forward, forming a subtle barrier between the press and whoever was inside. Then he appeared, Ethan Harrington, tall and poised, dressed in a crisp charcoal suit. Mia froze, her heartbeat spiking. She wanted to bolt before he could see her, but she couldn't move. Her gaze locked onto him, recalling how he had looked months ago under dim lounge lighting, how he had offered her a warm smile and gentle words. Was it truly the same man? She felt absurd even questioning it. She knew it was him. She watched as Ethan surveyed the hospital entrance, exchanging a few nods with staff who rushed to greet him. Photographers angled for better shots, their shutters clicking rapidly. Mia stepped back, hoping to blend in with the other white-coated figures, but her efforts did little good. Her heart skipped when Ethan's eyes roamed across the faces in the foyer and paused on hers. For a single breath, neither of them moved. It felt like the entire hospital hushed. A fleeting, uncertain smile touched his lips. Mia's pulse hammered, torn between wanting to run over and speak to him and wanting to disappear. She could see the moment confusion crossed his face, as if he was asking himself if he really recognized her. He began to step forward. A figure slid between them, blocking Ethan's path. Travis Caldwell. The older man pressed a hand to Ethan's elbow and steered him purposefully aside. "We're all so delighted you could join us," Travis said in a polished tone. "Perhaps we can start with a quick word upstairs before we tour the facility?" Ethan offered Travis a polite nod, still trying to angle himself toward Mia, but Travis guided him through the crowd with practiced ease, leading him away from her like a river's current dragging a leaf downstream. Mia let out a shaky breath, feeling both relieved and disappointed. Her head spun as she wondered what would have happened if Travis hadn't intervened. Would Ethan have recognized her instantly? Or would he have walked by, politely acknowledging a vaguely familiar face? Lucy sidled up next to Mia, eyes wide. "Did you see that? It looked like he was trying to get to you." Mia's throat felt tight. I'm not sure," she answered, carefully avoiding Lucy's gaze. The swirl of conflicting emotions inside her nearly made her dizzy. They soon heard rumors buzzing. Ethan had gone to the main conference room for a formal presentation about his foundation's interest in the pediatric wing. Mia was expected to attend, in theory, but she hung back, uncertain if she could handle facing him in front of all those people. She kept recalling the memory of their one night together, the warmth of his laugh, and then the morning she discovered she was pregnant, now with quadruplets. She still hadn't told him, let alone come to grips with it herself. Still, she was chief of pediatrics. Duty called. She forced herself toward the conference room, where rows of seats faced a podium displaying a slideshow of philanthropic goals. The door was propped open, and the place was packed with department heads, administrative staff, and some board members. Mia lingered near the back, trying not to draw attention. Ethan took the podium, eyes scanning the crowd. He spoke about his vision for expanding pediatric services, providing cutting-edge technology, and offering broader care to children in need. His words were confident and genuine. Mia couldn't help admiring how he combined passion with business sense, laying out details of the potential partnership. She recalled how, during their brief encounter, he'd told her he loved to see real impact from his work, not just profits on a page. Hearing him now confirmed that wasn't just sweet talk. He truly wanted to make a difference. Partway through, he cleared his throat. "We believe direct communication with the pediatric team is vital," he said, glancing at a sheet of paper in front of him. "And I'm told we have a new chief of pediatrics here, Dr. Mia Carter. I'd like her input." Mia's heart jammed against her ribs. She swallowed, the moment of truth pressing in. Should she raise her hand or speak up? Before she could decide, Travis leaned in and whispered something to Ethan, prompting him to skip forward in the presentation. Mia noticed Ethan's frustration flicker, though he continued speaking smoothly. She didn't have to say anything after all. The meeting rolled on with slides about budget allocations and proposed renovations, details that blurred in Mia's mind as she wrestled with her own turmoil. When the presentation ended, applause echoed around the room. Ethan stepped away from the podium, shaking hands with several board members. He was polite but seemed restless, as if he had unfinished business. Mia slipped into the hallway, hoping the crush of people would hide her. She couldn't leave the hospital, but she needed air, needed a moment to gather herself before some accidental face-off that would leave her vulnerable in front of everyone. As she darted around a corner, she nearly collided with Ethan himself. Their eyes met. He whispered her name, low and cautious. "Mia?" His voice carried both confusion and a hint of relief, as though confirming a suspicion he'd had since he entered the building. She froze, heart pounding. For a split second, all the memories of that night rushed over her. The music, the conversation, how they'd laughed like they'd known each other for years. "Hi," she managed, her voice almost inaudible. He opened his mouth to speak, but two uniformed security guards appeared, trailing behind him. One murmured that Travis was waiting down the hall, insisting on an urgent meeting. Ethan tried to wave them off. "Just give me a moment." "Sir, we have strict instructions," one guard pressed, stepping closer. His apologetic smile didn't lessen the pressure in the moment. With a tense glance over his shoulder, Ethan gave Mia a look that pleaded, "Don't go anywhere," before he was shepherded away. Mia's hands trembled at her sides, and she could only stand there, adrenaline surging. The fleeting glimpse of recognition in his eyes had been enough to confirm that he did remember her. Even so, she wasn't sure whether to feel relief or terror at the thought of explaining the quadruplets. She navigated the halls in a daze, half wanting to find Ethan and half terrified of what he would say if they had a real conversation. She spotted Lucy lingering near a supply cart, giving Mia a puzzled look. Mia gave her a tight nod, signaling she was fine. In truth, Lucy's concerned expression only reminded Mia how fragile the situation was. She had to plan carefully. She couldn't risk rumors swirling or gossip overshadowing her professional role. At midday, Mia tried to grab a quick sandwich, but the cafeteria buzzed with talk. Snippets of conversation floated to her ears. "So handsome. Such a generous donation. Wonder if he's single. Travis is practically glued to his side." Mia swiftly walked away, appetite gone. She found a quiet corner near the elevators to catch her breath. The father of her babies, was that truly the man now stepping through the corridors, escorted by one of the hospital's most powerful board members? By afternoon, tensions rose further. She overheard Travis belittling her in front of a small group of staff. "She's new and untested," he said in a dismissive tone, arms folded. "We need to be sure that Harrington sees real leadership potential in this pediatric department, otherwise he'll lose interest. A newbie might not cut it. If it were up to me, we'd have a more seasoned chief in place." Those words pricked Mia's pride. She approached, holding her head high. "I can assure you, Mr. Caldwell, I'm perfectly capable of discussing pediatric care with any potential partner. My credentials speak for themselves." He arched an eyebrow. "Certainly, Dr. Carter. But let's hope your passion matches your ability. We wouldn't want any personal distractions jeopardizing this hospital's future." His implication was clear, and Mia bristled. Yet she refused to bow to his intimidation. "My focus is on patient care, Mr. Caldwell. No personal matter will interfere with that." He gave a tiny smirk, as if amused by her defiance, then turned on his heel and left. Mia's face burned, anger sizzling in her veins. She worried what Travis might be hinting at, and she hated feeling so trapped. If only she could talk to Ethan freely, or at least lay everything on the table without judgment. As the day wound down, the corridors thinned, some staff going home for the evening. Mia spotted Ethan in the lobby, shaking hands with the hospital director and wearing a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. She lingered behind a pillar, uncertain whether to approach. He finished his farewells, looking around as though scanning for someone. Her heart skipped. He was looking for her. She felt equally drawn to him and rooted in place by her own fears. In the end, she did nothing but watch. Finally, Ethan left through the main doors, stepping into the twilight where the same sleek black car waited. She watched from the second-floor window as he cast a last glance over his shoulder, the line of his jaw set in frustration. The car door closed and he disappeared behind tinted glass, heading into the fading light. For a long moment, Mia stared at the space where his car had been, her pulse in her ears. She felt regret and relief, excitement and dread, all at once. Would they get another chance to speak? Could she possibly keep her pregnancy a secret much longer? Then her phone vibrated. She dug it out of her coat pocket, seeing an unknown sender. Her breath caught as she opened the message. "Meet me tomorrow, same lounge, 8 p.m. E." Mia stepped onto the sidewalk outside her apartment, hugging her coat around her shoulders as dusk settled over the city. A light breeze stirred the streetlights, making the night feel alive. She glanced at her watch, 7:45 p.m. She had 15 minutes to reach the lounge. 15 minutes to decide what she would actually say to Ethan once she was face to face with him again. She'd spent all day wrestling with her own conflicting emotions, to the point where her nerves felt frayed at the edges. A taxi pulled up, and she slid inside, giving the driver the address with a quiet instruction to take the fastest route. As the car wove through the busy streets, Mia peered out at the glowing shop windows and blurred headlights, remembering how it had felt the last time she was in that lounge. She'd been carefree that night, laughing with her friends when a charming stranger named Ethan asked if she wanted to share a private booth. She'd never have imagined that brief encounter could lead her to where she was now, pregnant with quadruplets, uncertain how to tell him everything. At 7:58, she stepped out in front of the elegant entrance. The same golden glow spilled onto the sidewalk, and the music thrummed just below the city's hum. Her heart pounded as she pulled open the door. It was quieter than she remembered, or maybe it was just her own heightened awareness. One of the servers recognized her from that fateful evening and offered a polite nod. She wondered if they also remembered Ethan, the tall man with the confident smile. She felt her cheeks grow warm and tried to steady her breathing. She spotted him immediately. Ethan stood from a small table in a secluded corner, arms folded across his chest. His eyes found hers, and for a moment, the lounge and all its soft music and low chatter seemed to blur. She walked over, heart thumping. "You came," he said, voice low but firm. Relief threaded his words, and a hint of tension lined his face. Mia slipped out of her coat, draping it over the chair as she sat. "You asked me to," she replied, trying to maintain composure. She could barely meet his gaze without remembering every detail of their night together, every laugh shared over cocktails, every moment that led to the one secret she carried now. "I did," he agreed, exhaling a pent-up breath. "I've been trying to reach you since I first saw you at the hospital. I didn't know you were the new chief of pediatrics. You didn't tell me that part." She shrugged, eyes flicking away. "You didn't tell me you owned the conglomerate that basically funds half the city's healthcare programs," she countered. "I guess we both decided to keep things hidden." Ethan let out a soft laugh tinged with regret. "That night, I just wanted to be Ethan," he said, settling back into his seat. "No pressure, no board members, no corporate eyes on me. I wanted just real conversation with someone who didn't care about my last name." Mia's lips tightened. She couldn't deny she had liked meeting him that way, free of expectations. But things had changed. There was more at stake now than just reputations. "So that's why you never told me your surname?" she asked, trying to keep her voice from trembling. "You wanted anonymity?" He nodded. "In my world, anonymity is hard to come by. Everyone sees me as the CEO, the billionaire, the man who can snap his fingers and get what he wants. I wanted one night where I could be somebody else." Mia studied him, remembering how charming he had been, how easy it was to laugh with him. She'd sensed a deeper side to him even then. "I can understand that," she admitted. For a moment, neither spoke. The server brought glasses of water, setting them carefully on the table before retreating. The lounge's warm lighting cast soft shadows across Ethan's features. Mia noticed he looked tired, as if burdened by more than just the philanthropic project. She wondered how many demands came with running an empire. Ethan cleared his throat. "What about you?" he asked gently. "When we met, you acted like you didn't want to talk about your job. You just said you were a pediatric doctor." She picked at the edge of her napkin, remembering how she'd evaded any discussion of the hospital. "I was in a weird place too," she replied. "I'd just come off a long shift. I guess I wanted a chance to be normal for a change. Not the overworked doctor." He reached for his water, took a small sip. "Well, if it means anything, I haven't been able to stop thinking about that night. I've even tried to figure out how to find you, but I didn't have much to go on." Mia's heart fluttered. She felt the same, but she was too conflicted to fully indulge the memory. Between them was the unspoken reality that she was carrying his children, 4 of them. How could she lay that revelation on the table, here in this softly lit lounge with the risk of eavesdroppers or paparazzi around every corner? He leaned closer. "Mia, I'm sorry if you felt betrayed. I know finding out I'm the CEO might look like I lied to you, but I swear, it was never about deceiving you." She inhaled slowly, trying to formulate her thoughts. "I'm not exactly angry," she said at last, "but it's complicated. You didn't lie, neither of us did. We just didn't share everything." She felt her pulse spike at the word everything, as if her mind directly linked it to her pregnancy. His brow furrowed. "Why does it feel like there's more going on?" He searched her face, his expression quietly earnest. "Is something wrong?" Before she could answer, a flicker of movement drew her attention. A man near the bar raised a camera, snapping a quick photo. The flash illuminated the table for half a second, and staff rushed over, exchanging urgent words. Mia's chest tightened. A paparazzo. Of course. She was in a lounge with one of the city's most sought-after moguls, and her worst fear was coming true. "That's enough!" one staffer hissed, blocking the photographer's next shot. The paparazzo backed off, but the damage was done. Mia's anxiety shot through the roof. If pictures of her with Ethan got out, it could fuel rumors that she was receiving special treatment at the hospital, or worse, that she was having some clandestine affair with him. Her professional reputation would be on the line. Ethan cursed under his breath, standing quickly. He signaled for the lounge's security to handle the intruder. Mia, thoroughly rattled, gathered her coat and purse. "I can't do this," she whispered, her mind racing with all the possible headlines. She envisioned Travis latching onto any scandal he could find. Ethan caught her arm gently. "Mia, wait. Don't worry about that. I'll make sure those photos never see the light of day." She shook her head, her eyes stinging with stress. "Maybe you can, but I can't risk it. My whole career, everything I've worked for, depends on staying above any suspicion, especially now." She swallowed hard, cutting herself off before she confessed more. "Especially now?" he prompted gently, noticing her hesitation. She looked away, pressing her lips together. "It's just a bad time for me, all right? She trailed off, feeling cornered by her own secret. He seemed torn between frustration and concern, letting go of her arm. "Let me at least walk you out," he offered. They left the lounge quickly, passing the staff who were still scolding the paparazzo. Outside, a gust of cool air hit them both. They paused on the sidewalk, city lights reflecting in puddles left by an earlier rain. The tension pulsed, an unspoken conversation swirling between them. Ethan looked at her, sadness edging his gaze. "Mia, talk to me. If something's happening in your life, I want to know." She clutched her coat tighter. She felt a lump in her throat, warring between telling him everything and shielding herself from the fallout. "I don't even know how to explain it," she admitted. "Not tonight." His jaw tightened slightly. He was a man used to answers, yet he nodded, showing a patience that almost unraveled her restraint. "All right, I'll respect that. But please don't shut me out completely." They took a step away from the lounge entrance, the neon sign casting a faint glow over them. Mia stared at the reflections of passing cars in the wet pavement, heart twisting. Something in her wanted to lean on him, to let him help shoulder the weight, but she feared what revealing the truth might do to them both, especially with Travis circling like a vulture at the hospital. Ethan signaled for a cab for her, ignoring his own car waiting at the curb. "You need this more than I do," he said softly, opening the taxi door. She managed a small smile of gratitude. The city air felt charged, thick with the potential of all that remained unsaid. "Thanks," she murmured, slipping onto the seat. As she pulled the door shut, he bent down, resting an arm on the window. "I meant what I said. I'll deal with any fallout from those photos, okay? Don't be afraid." She nodded, though part of her remained unconvinced that damage control was so simple. The taxi pulled away, leaving Ethan standing on the curb, hands in his pockets, his gaze following her. Mia leaned her head back against the seat, exhaling shakily. Her heart pounded with the weight of the conversation that hadn't happened. She'd wanted to tell him everything, but the fear of what it might mean, how it might upend his world and hers, held her back. The driver navigated the streets, weaving among the traffic. Mia stared at the blur of lights, thinking of the tiny heartbeats inside her, 4 precious lives already counting on her to figure this out. The pang of responsibility was almost overwhelming. She had to let Ethan know eventually. She couldn't raise 4 babies on her own without telling him they even existed. Yet she also had to consider how Travis might twist the truth, how the hospital board might react if they learned she was pregnant by the man funding their biggest philanthropic project. Her new position would be under scrutiny. She feared whispers of preferential treatment or scandal. Could Ethan protect her from that? More importantly, could she protect herself? Mia's head pulsed with a dull ache. She checked her phone, half expecting a flurry of messages, but there were none. She realized that after everything tonight, they had barely scratched the surface of what needed to be said. She clutched her purse in her lap, feeling the ultrasound prints tucked inside. 4 babies. She wondered if telling him sooner rather than later might be best, or if she should first secure a stable plan for herself. The taxi slowed to a stop in front of her building. She paid the fare, stepping out into the night's quiet hush. Her feet felt heavy as she climbed the steps to her apartment, the swirling thoughts impossible to silence. Once inside, she set her things down and gazed at her phone again. The gravity of her situation settled like a stone in her chest. She couldn't keep running from the truth. Her thumb hovered over Ethan's contact. The memory of his worried eyes came rushing back. With trembling determination, she opened a blank message. Everything inside her screamed that it was time, that he deserved to know, no matter how complicated it might become. Inside the taxi, Mia finally resolves that Ethan has to know. She texts him, "We need to talk. Tomorrow, my office. This is urgent." Mia had hardly slept. The morning sun found her hunched behind her desk, eyes fixed on the ultrasound prints that lay scattered like secrets she could no longer hide. Every few seconds, she glanced at the door of her small private office, half expecting Ethan to walk in. Anxiety prickled through her, a steady hum of nerves that refused to subside. She reached for a styrofoam cup of lukewarm tea, sipping it to calm her stomach. Nothing helped. When she heard footsteps in the hallway, her breath caught. A soft knock preceded Lucy's gentle push on the door. Mia exhaled slowly, trying to compose herself. Lucy guided Ethan inside with the utmost care, almost like she was aware the conversation about to unfold was precarious for everyone involved. Her friend's concerned gaze flicked between the two of them. "I'll wait outside," Lucy offered. She shut the door, leaving Mia and Ethan in an uneasy silence. Ethan stood there in a tailored suit, but he looked uncharacteristically nervous. He took a few steps toward Mia's desk, eyes shifting from the scattered ultrasound prints to her pale face. "Thanks for agreeing to meet," he said quietly. "Your message sounded urgent." Mia swallowed and rose from her chair, her hand trembling as she gestured for him to sit on the small couch near the window. She joined him there, though she couldn't bring herself to meet his gaze just yet. Her heart thundered. "I don't know where to start," she admitted softly. She gripped the edge of the couch cushion, trying to steady her thoughts. This was it. No more delaying. "There's something I need to tell you, and it's big." He leaned forward, concern written across his features. "You can tell me anything, Mia, I promise. I'm here to listen." She closed her eyes for a second, bracing herself, then looked at him directly. "I'm pregnant." The words felt monumental, echoing in the small space. She caught the flicker of shock in his eyes, followed by realization. Before he could form a response, she pressed on, her voice trembling. "It's yours, Ethan. And there's more." She hesitated, pulse racing. "It's quadruplets." He went completely still. His lips parted, and he blinked, as if his mind was struggling to keep pace with what he'd just heard. She watched the color drain from his face, replaced by a swirl of emotions, astonishment, confusion, and something akin to awe. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours. "Quadruplets," he echoed at last, his voice barely above a whisper. He glanced at the ultrasound prints on the desk. 4 faint, tiny images, 4 little lives. He swallowed hard, turning back to Mia. How long have you known?" "Not that long," she confessed. "A few weeks at most. I was overwhelmed and I didn't know how to reach you, or if you'd even want to hear from me. You never told me your full name until I pieced it together at the hospital." Her eyes brimmed with tears she'd been holding back. "And with everything going on, I was terrified about what this meant for my job and for us." He gently placed his hand on her arm. "God, Mia, I'm sorry. I never wanted to abandon you. If I'd known—" His words broke off, replaced by an anxious softness. "Quadruplets," he repeated, as though the magnitude still hadn't fully settled in. Then, unexpectedly, a fragile smile tugged at his lips. "We're having 4 babies?" Her throat tightened, and she gave a small, shaky nod. Tears threatened, and she blinked them away. "I felt I had to handle it alone," she whispered. "But I can't. It's so much bigger than me, and I'm scared." Ethan slid an arm around her shoulders, and a comforting warmth washed over her. She could sense his own fear, but mingled with it was an immediate protectiveness. "You won't do this alone," he promised. "Not if you'll have me here. I just wish you'd told me sooner, or that I'd told you who I really was." They sat in that moment of hushed confession, letting the enormity of it settle in until the door swung open without warning. Travis Caldwell barged in, face set in feigned concern. "Am I interrupting?" His tone carried an edge that made both Mia and Ethan tense. Ethan stood, drawing himself up. "You might want to knock next time," he said, trying to keep his composure. Travis waved off the comment, his attention landing on the ultrasound prints on Mia's desk. The briefest smirk curved his lips. "Ah, so there's more to Dr. Carter's life than just hospital duties." His gaze slid to Ethan. "Is this a personal meeting, Mr. Harrington? Because we have some urgent hospital matters to discuss, and I'd hate to see your philanthropic interests compromised by side affairs." Heat rose to Mia's cheeks, equal parts anger and embarrassment. Ethan squared his shoulders. "My interests are my own to manage. If there's hospital business to address, it can wait a few minutes." But Travis, feigning innocence, stepped closer. Now, I'm only thinking of the hospital's reputation. It wouldn't look good if the new chief of pediatrics was getting special treatment from our biggest potential donor." His eyes flashed toward Mia. "Nepotism is an ugly word, though, wouldn't you say, Dr. Carter?" Mia rose, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath. "There's no nepotism here. My position was earned through years of hard work and proven results." "Of course," Travis replied smoothly, the corners of his mouth tightening. "Still, one can't help noticing how this association might raise questions. particularly if there are children on the way, courtesy of our hospital's main benefactor." Ethan bristled. "That is entirely our private business, Caldwell, and it doesn't concern you." Travis drummed his fingers on the desk, glancing at the ultrasound images in a pointed way. "Private business has a way of becoming public scandal, especially if the board feels the hospital's integrity is at risk. Let's just say, some of us pay attention to details, especially ones that could rock the boat." He turned, almost theatrically, as Lucy entered, face flushed with indignation at Travis's intrusion. "Travis, I think Dr. Carter needs some space," Lucy said firmly. "This is her office, after all." He gave a little huff, not quite a laugh. "Yes, well, I'll leave you to your discussion." But before he exited, he pivoted, fixing Ethan with a cold smile. "We have that board meeting soon. I hope your time here doesn't distract you from the pressing matter of corporate decisions. Remember, Mr. Harrington, it's not just your position at stake. It's the entire future of these hospitals." The door clicked shut behind him, leaving the room charged with unresolved tension. Mia sank into her chair, her nerves frayed. Ethan and Lucy exchanged grim looks, while the echo of Travis's veiled threat hung in the air. Mia's hand shook as Ethan tried to steady her. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I had no idea Travis would barge in like that." Lucy joined them, voice hushed. "He's been suspicious since he caught wind of the possible connection between you two. Now that he's seen the ultrasound prints, he'll have plenty of ammunition if he wants to twist the story." Mia felt tears pricking again. "I don't want to lose my job. I don't want the babies to be a scandal. But what do? I can't hide anymore." Ethan's expression hardened with resolve. "We'll figure it out. If Travis thinks he can manipulate this situation for his own gain, he's got another thing coming. He can threaten me all he likes, but he won't harm you, or the children." Lucy gently squeezed Mia's shoulder. "I'll support you any way I can," she promised. "And Ethan, if you're in this, you'd better be prepared. Travis plays dirty." Ethan nodded, though Mia could see the weight pressing on him. Their private conversation about quadruplets had exploded into something bigger, overshadowed by Travis's schemes. Mia realized they still had so many details to discuss: her prenatal care, how to handle time off if complications arose, how to deal with public perception. But for now, it seemed all they could do was brace themselves for the next storm. Sensing that Mia needed to breathe, Lucy slipped out, and Ethan turned to face Mia fully. He bent down, taking her hand in his. "I don't want you to be scared. We'll find top specialists, get you the best care. Public scrutiny, board meetings, I'll handle it. I promise." Her eyes welled with gratitude and uncertainty in equal measure. "I feel like I'm leaping off a cliff without knowing if there's any safety net. But thank you for being here." He lifted her hand to his lips, gently. "We're in this together now." For the first time all morning, Mia felt a glimmer of solace. Even though Travis's threats loomed, at least she no longer faced this alone. She was scared, but Ethan's presence brought a fragile sense of hope. That fragile calm was short-lived. No sooner had Ethan stepped out to speak with hospital administrators than Mia's phone lit up with a text from Lucy. "They're calling an emergency board meeting tomorrow. Travis is up to something." Mia entered the hospital lobby that morning with her shoulders tense and her stomach churning. She had spent much of the night plagued by restless sleep, her mind bouncing between stress over the impending board meeting and the nagging worry that her pregnancy symptoms were worsening. As she crossed the tiled floor, she spotted Lucy waiting near the reception desk. Her friend wore a look of cautious optimism, but Mia could see the concern lurking beneath. "Morning," Lucy greeted softly. "Any better today?" Mia gave a small shake of her head. "I'm trying not to throw up," she admitted. The wave of nausea came on strong, nearly sending her back to the restroom, but she steadied herself with a few slow breaths. Lucy offered a sympathetic smile. "Hey, you got this. Just take it easy and let me know if you need anything, especially if things get worse." They began walking toward the pediatric wing, exchanging quick updates on urgent patients. The morning's hush was broken by the distant clang of a gurney, the soft chatter of nurses prepping for their shifts, and the occasional beep of monitors. Mia forced herself to focus on her tasks, hoping it might distract her. But despite her best efforts, her thoughts kept circling back to Ethan and the sudden board meeting called by the Harrington conglomerate. According to the rumors swirling, Travis Caldwell had used every connection he had to call an emergency session, claiming concerns about Ethan's leadership and personal entanglements. The entire situation felt surreal to Mia. Just days earlier, her biggest worry was hiding the pregnancy. Now she was facing the possibility that Travis might force Ethan out of the CEO role altogether, jeopardizing not only the conglomerate's support for the hospital, but also the stability they needed to navigate her high-risk pregnancy. She parted ways with Lucy to handle a complicated pediatric case. A toddler, newly admitted with a fever that soared dangerously high, needed immediate evaluation. Mia's face was drawn with fatigue, but she slid on her white coat and sank into her doctor's routine, letting muscle memory and training guide her. She carefully examined the little boy, offering gentle reassurance to his anxious parents, ordering blood work, and setting up an IV for fluids. Every so often her chest tightened with a dull ache. She recognized it as stress rather than any direct complication from her pregnancy, but it gnawed at her confidence. By mid-morning, she ducked into a supply closet for a moment of quiet. She needed to confirm if Ethan's board meeting was in progress. She fumbled for her phone, scanning for any updates. Nothing. No new texts from Ethan, no messages from Lucy. She pressed the phone to her chest and exhaled shakily. He had to face Travis and the other board members alone, with the entire empire he'd built on the line, an empire that now provided critical funding for her hospital and for the quadruplets she carried. Finally, a short buzz in her hand startled her. It was Lucy, texting, "He's heading to the boardroom now. Saw James Monroe with him." He looked worried. No word on Travis. Mia's heart quickened. She knew James Monroe only by reputation, Ethan's trusted right-hand man. If James was worried, that meant Ethan was walking into a tense situation. She closed her eyes, suddenly overcome by a wave of dizziness. The stress, the pregnancy, the responsibility, it was all piling up. She told herself to breathe, reminded herself she had patients to care for, then quietly slipped out of the supply closet and returned to the ward. Hours later, the day seemed to drag by in fits and starts. Mia's staff meeting was overshadowed by anxious chatter about Harrington Conglomerate's future. Even the hospital administrators seemed on edge, uncertain if they could rely on the philanthropic funding that had been so promising. Whispers carried stories of how Travis might exploit any perceived weakness in Ethan, from the rumored romance with the chief of pediatrics to the potential scandal if word of Mia's pregnancy leaked. Every time Mia heard a passing remark, her stomach knotted tighter. At midday, she finally managed to steal a few minutes to eat something bland and check in with Lucy. They found a quiet corridor by a window, the light filtered through glass blocks, turning everything faintly golden. Lucy spoke in hushed tones. "I wish we had a direct line into that boardroom. Travis apparently marched in with binders of data. Who knows what he's planning?" Mia rubbed her temples, the faintest beginnings of a headache lurking. "He's probably going after Ethan's personal life, our situation." She hesitated, glancing around to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "I'm scared, Lucy. If Travis convinces the board that Ethan's too distracted or compromised, Ethan could lose everything. The hospital might lose vital funding, and if Travis drags me into it, I could lose my job." Lucy gently rested a hand on Mia's shoulder. "We'll figure out a way through. Ethan won't let that happen. And if Travis does force him out, we'll fight to protect you. You're not alone in this." Mia swallowed a lump in her throat. "Thank you," she whispered. It was all she could manage. Not long after, she was summoned to the hospital director's office. She feared the worst, that Travis had already twisted the board's ear, prompting the director to question her role. However, she soon learned it was about an ongoing administrative issue, a staff shortage in pediatrics. Exhausted but relieved not to be hammered with accusations, she gave her input on schedule adjustments, quietly seething at how easily Travis's corporate games overshadowed real medical concerns. Throughout the conversation, she could feel a subtle tension from the director, who kept glancing at his phone for any updates on the Harrington conglomerate's situation. Everyone was waiting for news from that boardroom. The hours ticked by. Finally, near mid-afternoon, Lucy found Mia in the hallway, eyes shining with a flicker of relief. "I just heard from one of the staff upstairs," she whispered. "The board's still deliberating, but Ethan walked out during a recess to make a call. He insisted they break so he could gather information on philanthropic expansions. Seems he's holding strong, at least for now." Mia released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "That's good news, but it's not over." "No," Lucy said softly. "It's not. But maybe Ethan has a chance to counter Travis's allegations." Mia returned to the pediatric ward where a frightened mother with a newborn pneumonia case needed reassurance. She smiled softly, speaking in calm tones as she adjusted the baby's oxygen. Although her insides quivered with anxiety, she drew on every ounce of professional composure to focus on what mattered most, healing her patients. It was a reminder that no matter what corporate battle brewed beyond the hospital walls, children's lives were in her hands today. As the afternoon waned, she began to feel a leaden fatigue settle over her. The familiar heaviness in her limbs was accompanied by a flurry of mild cramps. Nothing severe, just enough to unnerve her. She discreetly stepped into an empty exam room to sit down and breathe. She pressed a hand to her stomach, silently willing the quadruplets to stay safe and remain calm. It wasn't just her career or Ethan's leadership in jeopardy. It was her growing family. Almost an hour passed before her phone vibrated again. This time it was Ethan's number. She answered in a rush, stepping into a corner away from curious ears. His voice sounded weary but resolute. "Travis brought up every piece of rumor he could find, trying to paint me as unstable for the role of CEO. I refuted him with data about our philanthropic expansions, how our partnership with the hospital is crucial and well-managed. I mentioned your outstanding work in pediatrics, too." Mia's breath caught. "You mentioned me?" "In a professional sense," he clarified, "showing that your department is exactly why our philanthropic arm has potential. But Travis tried to twist it, acting like I was playing favorites. The board's split right now. We reconvene in the morning for a final vote." He sighed audibly. "I'm so sorry, Mia. I'm trying to keep you out of the spotlight, but Travis is relentless." Her voice shook. "What happens if he wins the board over?" Ethan paused. "I could lose my role as CEO, but I'll fight it. I still have some allies, and I'm not giving up on our plans for the pediatric wing, or on you and the babies." A tightness clutched Mia's chest at his words. "Stay strong," she whispered. "We'll get through this. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself." "I promise," he said. They shared a moment of unspoken solidarity before hanging up, the hush of the hospital hallway crowding in again. Mia stood there, phone in hand, replaying Ethan's vow to fight for them, to continue supporting her department. For a flicker of a second, she felt a renewed hope. Perhaps they weren't as alone against Travis as they feared. Any glimmer of relief was snuffed out moments later. She spotted Travis stepping off the elevator with a measured stride, his expression smug. He headed purposefully toward the exit, and Mia realized he must be leaving the building now that the board meeting was adjourned for the day. His gaze swept the corridor until he found her, and he paused. A slow smirk curved his lips as he sauntered in her direction. He said nothing at first, merely letting the tension seep into the space between them. Then, with cold finality, he spoke just loud enough for her to hear. "Tomorrow, the vote decides everything." Mia awoke to a faint throbbing in her lower belly and a sheen of sweat on her forehead. At first, she blamed it on another restless night, the kind she'd grown used to over the past weeks. But as she shifted beneath the sheets, she realized the discomfort felt sharper, more insistent. She tried to sit up, breathing through the pulse of pain that radiated across her abdomen. A wave of panic followed when she remembered that Travis's influence at today's pivotal board meeting could reshape everything: Ethan's future at the conglomerate, her own position as chief of pediatrics, and even the secure medical care she and the quadruplets desperately needed. Her phone vibrated on the nightstand, jarring her from the tangle of anxious thoughts. She grabbed it, relieved to see Lucy's name flash on the screen. "How are you feeling?" Lucy asked gently when Mia answered. Mia closed her eyes, steadying her breath. "Not great," she admitted. "Cramping a bit." Lucy hesitated. "Cramping? Mia, you need to be careful. High-risk pregnancies mean even small symptoms can grow serious." "I know," Mia said, voice trembling more than she'd like. "It's just, I have to go in. The board reconvenes today. Travis is ready to move against Ethan, and if Ethan loses control of the conglomerate, I don't even know if the hospital will keep me on or if we'll get the support we need." "Mia," Lucy's tone softened, "I understand why you feel pressured to show up, but your health and the babies come first, okay? Promise me you'll stop by the maternity ward if the pain doesn't ease." "Promise," Mia murmured. After hanging up, she carefully swung her legs off the bed and dressed in loose, comfortable clothing that hid her growing bump. She pressed a hand against her abdomen where 4 tiny lives fluttered. The thought of them both comforted and terrified her, especially with the day's uncertainties ahead. By the time she arrived at the hospital, the morning bustle was at its peak. She caught glimpses of colleagues hurrying to their departments, voices echoing in the corridors. Patients and families milled in the waiting area, many of them children with anxious parents. In the midst of it all, Mia tried to find Lucy, who had texted that she'd meet her at the front desk. She spotted Lucy easily. Her friend stood with arms crossed, a worried expression painting her features. As soon as Mia approached, Lucy saw the strain in her posture and wasted no time taking her arm. "Come with me," Lucy urged. "We're checking on those cramps." Mia resisted at first, gesturing around them at the busy hospital. "Lucy, I have patients. Rounds—" "You have to take care of yourself if you want to be there for everyone else," Lucy countered. "We're just getting you looked at. A quick assessment. No arguments." Reluctantly, Mia let Lucy guide her toward the maternity ward. She dreaded the idea of staff discovering her pregnancy in such a public way, but she couldn't deny that the persistent ache in her abdomen had grown more pointed since she woke. Lucy's reassurance that they would be discreet kept her moving forward. The maternity ward felt like a world apart, with pastel walls and soft lighting creating a gentle atmosphere. They passed a few pregnant women shuffling slowly in hospital gowns, some with supportive partners by their sides. Mia hugged her purse close, wishing Ethan could be here. But she also knew he was fighting a different kind of battle on the executive floor, where Travis would soon launch his next offensive. An obstetrics nurse named Irene ushered Mia into a small examination room. Lucy explained that Mia was having some cramping and needed a quick check. Irene nodded sympathetically, instructing Mia to lie back on a narrow bed while Lucy waited by her side. Mia's heart hammered with worry as she felt the cool gel applied to her belly. The ultrasound wand glided over her skin, capturing images of the 4 tiny occupants. She peered at the monitor, relief flooding her when she saw 4 distinct flickers. Their hearts still beat with determined, rhythmic pulses. Irene measured them carefully, gaze focused on the screen. Once she finished, she handed Mia a towel to wipe off the gel, her voice calm. "All 4 look stable," Irene said. "But the cramping isn't nothing, Mia. With quadruplets, we don't take any chances. I'd like the on-call OB to do a brief exam and keep you monitored for a little while." Mia felt Lucy squeeze her hand. "You see?" Lucy said, relief mingling with concern. "Let them do what they need to do. Your body is telling you to slow down." Exhaustion settled over Mia, deeper than she cared to admit. She realized that the stress of the last few days, of Travis's threats and the board meeting tension, had taken more of a toll on her than she'd realized. "Fine," she murmured, forcing a small smile. "I'll stay for a bit." The nurse stepped out, leaving Lucy to sit with her. Mia closed her eyes, letting the quiet be her refuge, until a series of urgent footsteps and muffled voices spilled in from the corridor. She looked up just as Ethan burst through the doorway, breathless, worry etched across his face. James Monroe followed at his heels but paused outside to grant them privacy. "I heard you were here," Ethan said, scanning her features. "Are you okay? Lucy texted me, said you were being monitored." "I'm fine," Mia insisted softly, though she felt tears threaten at the corners of her eyes. Seeing him so visibly concerned awakened emotions she'd been holding at bay. "They just want to make sure the cramping isn't a sign of preterm labor. The baby's heartbeats are still strong." He exhaled, relief plain on his face. Taking her hand, he lowered his voice. "I was in the middle of the board session, but I had to come. Travis was spouting all kinds of nonsense about conflicts of interest, but I can't ignore you and the babies." She squeezed his fingers. "Thank you for coming. But you need to protect your position, Ethan. The hospital depends on you. I don't want Travis using this as an excuse to say you're neglecting your duties." Ethan shook his head. "I'm not leaving you alone right now. James is covering for me upstairs, and the board took a recess anyway. Travis can rant all he wants. My family is more important." His voice tightened. "That's what you and these babies are. My family." Mia's cheeks warmed at the tenderness in his words, but a spark of anxiety quickly followed. "Travis will see it as a weakness to exploit. He'll see it however he wants," Ethan growled softly. "But I won't let him threaten you again. That's a promise." Lucy cleared her throat gently. "I'll give you two a moment," she said, stepping outside to speak with James. The door fell shut behind her, leaving Mia and Ethan in a fragile pocket of privacy. Mia closed her eyes for a moment, feeling tears escape. "I'm so afraid," she admitted. "Afraid of losing my job, or that you'll lose your position, or that we can't protect these babies when so many people would delight in seeing us fail." Ethan moved closer, brushing a stray tear from her cheek with his thumb. "I'm not going anywhere. We'll fight for what's right, for you, for them, for the hospital. Travis is playing a short-sighted game. He wants control, but I've got allies. When this is over, we'll make sure our children have the best care." Her tears eased, replaced by a determination that she drew from Ethan's calm. For all his talk of corporate battles, she realized he was truly invested in standing by her side, no matter the outcome. They shared a hesitant smile, and she lifted her hand to rest against his cheek, letting her fingertips trace the subtle tension in his jaw. They lingered like that until the on-call obstetrician, Dr. Rawlings, gently knocked and entered. Mia and Ethan straightened as Dr. Rawlings reviewed the ultrasound images, questioned Mia about her symptoms, and listened to the baby's heartbeats once more. The tension was palpable, but after several minutes, she gave a cautious nod. "It appears to be a stress-related episode," Dr. Rawlings concluded. "No immediate signs of preterm labor. But Mia, you need to understand that quadruplet pregnancies can change quickly. That means rest and as little anxiety as possible." She glanced meaningfully at Ethan, then back at Mia. "I recommend you stay for observation for the rest of the day. If everything remains stable, you can go home tonight, but under strict instructions to reduce stress." Mia bit her lip, searching Ethan's face. She expected him to argue that she couldn't just linger here, but he surprised her, nodding firmly at Dr. Rawlings. "Thank you, Doctor. She'll stay until you're comfortable with her leaving. I'll make sure her responsibilities are covered." Relief and gratitude rushed through Mia, mingled with a twinge of guilt. She wasn't used to leaning on others, but everything was different now. Ethan pressed a light kiss to her forehead, easing her back onto the pillow as Dr. Rawlings stepped out to finalize arrangements. Lucy poked her head in briefly to check on them, then returned to the corridor to talk with James about the board's next steps. "They can't start the official vote without you," Mia murmured, her voice carrying both apology and concern. "They can," Ethan corrected Riley, "but James will delay it. He's an expert at parliamentary procedure. He can stall long enough for me to get back there. And if Travis tries anything underhanded while I'm gone, James will blow the whistle." Mia's eyelids drooped. She hadn't realized how exhausted she was until now. "I hate feeling this helpless." "You're not helpless," Ethan assured her. "You're just in a high-risk pregnancy, and you're carrying 4 precious lives. That's anything but helpless. It's a miracle, and if you need rest, then rest." She nodded weakly, comforted by the compassion in his voice. The tension still loomed, but for the first time in days, Mia felt like she could truly let herself breathe. The future was uncertain, but she wasn't alone in facing it. Before long, Lucy and James reappeared. James's expression reflected cautious optimism, but Mia detected a glint in his eye suggesting that the board meeting was anything but straightforward upstairs. Lucy took Mia's vitals again, while James spoke quietly with Ethan near the door. "Travis is trying to raise the heat," James admitted, voice low. "He's been cornering a few swing vote board members, pushing the narrative that your personal entanglements have compromised the company's focus. But I've managed to keep the conversation technical, focusing on your results and philanthropic initiatives." Ethan nodded. "It's not unexpected. Let him posture. As soon as we have enough evidence of his underhanded tactics, the board will see it for what it is." He ran a hand through his hair. "Thank you, James. Keep stalling them." James gave a faint grin. "I'll do my best. But we've got a new problem. Travis discovered that Mia is on the verge of taking a medical leave if her pregnancy complications intensify. He's twisting that into a point about how she won't be able to maintain her position as chief of pediatrics. He's basically accusing you of trying to secure a puppet figure who won't be around to do the job." Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line. "He's got no right making comments on her personal health. That's private. We have to bury that angle before it becomes a mainstream talking point." From her bed, Mia overheard fragments, enough to sense the danger of Travis's strategy. She shivered, fingers bunching in the hospital blanket. Lucy placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, but Mia's mind spun with worst-case scenarios, being forced out of the hospital, overshadowed by rumors that she couldn't handle her duties due to pregnancy. "I'll handle it," Ethan said, stepping away from James and returning to Mia's side. "You just focus on keeping calm. Lucy, watch her. Make sure she follows Dr. Rawlings's orders." Lucy nodded. "I'll station myself right here, don't worry." Ethan looked down at Mia, their gazes locking. "I should head back to the boardroom or Travis will run wild. Are you going to be okay?" Mia reached for his hand. Her grip was weak, but the connection felt strong. "Go," she whispered. "Fight for everything we've built. I'll be all right." He leaned in, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I'm coming back the second this meeting is done. Don't let these babies make their grand entrance without me." The gentle humor in his tone made her smile, and he kissed her forehead once more before turning to leave. Lucy trailed after him, promising to check on the state of the board meeting herself. Mia was left momentarily alone in the hush of the maternity room, monitors beeping softly. Exhaustion tugged at her, but relief did too. She took a few deep breaths, grateful for the short reprieve from the chaos outside these walls. Minutes later, a rumble of commotion stirred in the hallway. Mia opened her eyes to see Ethan rushing back in, face tense with new urgency. "Mia," he said quickly, "I have to go upstairs right now. James just called. Travis is making threats again, something about new information that could jeopardize the entire funding structure if I don't back down." Mia pushed herself upright, wincing at the ache in her belly. "New information?" she echoed, dread rippling through her. He nodded grimly. I'm not sure what exactly, but I promise you, I won't let him hurt our future." She saw the resolve in his eyes, the fierce determination. "Go," she said again. "I'll stay put, like the doctor said." As Ethan left Mia's bedside, his phone rang. He lifted it, recognizing the caller. Mia heard a snippet of the urgent voice on the other end. "I've got the proof," James said breathlessly. "Meet me in the records room. Hurry!" Ethan hurried through the silent corridor, his footsteps echoing against the polished floor. It was late. Most of the hospital's administrative wing stood empty, the hum of distant machines the only sign of life. Nurses passing by threw him puzzled glances, but he had no time to explain. His heart drummed with urgency, propelled by James's urgent call. He clutched his phone in one hand, replaying James's words in his head. "I've got the proof. Meet me in the records room. Hurry!" He reached the large double doors of the records room to find them slightly ajar, a thin strip of fluorescent light spilling onto the otherwise dark hallway. Pushing one door open with his shoulder, he slipped inside. Rows of tall metal shelves created narrow aisles, each loaded with files and boxes labeled with patient names, hospital finances, and corporate documents. In the far corner, James stood at a tall metal cart, rifling through a stack of folders. "Here," James waved him over, voice hushed. "I found more than we expected. Financial statements, wire transfers, and hidden accounts in Travis's name. This ties him directly to the funds that went missing from the pediatric budget." Ethan's face tightened with anger as he flipped through the documents James handed him. Glancing over the suspicious transactions, he saw precisely how Travis had diverted money intended for life-saving equipment into his own pockets. "He's been stealing from the hospital," Ethan said, a low fury gathering in his voice, "all while trying to push me out for alleged negligence." James nodded grimly, leaning in so their voices wouldn't carry. "And it's worse than that. There's evidence he inflated bids on new construction projects, funneling profits to shell companies." He tapped one folder. "This is enough to bury him. Problem is, if we go public too fast, we risk a scandal that could damage the hospital's reputation. Patients might suffer." Ethan's jaw tensed. He pictured Mia upstairs, forced to stay in the maternity ward for rest, the quadruplets' well-being at risk. The last thing she needed was a massive scandal that could erode the hospital's funding. "So we use this carefully," he said. "We can't let Travis hold it over us anymore. Let's see him weasel out of this." James nodded. "Agreed. We confront him privately, demand he back off the hospital takeover. If he refuses, we threaten to expose everything. But we need to be sure we have backup copies in case he tries destroying the files." Ethan's mouth twisted. "This place is a gold mine for him to hide evidence, or destroy it. We have to secure these documents." He started gathering them up, carefully sliding them into a large envelope James had brought. The rustling of papers filled the quiet air. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from just outside the door. James froze, setting the last folder aside. Ethan's gaze snapped to the entrance. Travis Caldwell appeared in the doorway, his presence casting a tall shadow across the shelves. "Well, well," Travis remarked, stepping inside with a bland smile. "Curiosity can be such a dangerous pastime. Don't you agree?" His voice echoed among the aisles, dripping with smug confidence. Two large men, security hired by Travis no doubt, hovered behind him, blocking the exit. Ethan squared his shoulders, refusing to let fear show. "You'd know all about that, wouldn't you? Funny, we were just discovering how deep your curiosity into hospital funds goes." Travis's eyes flicked to the envelope in Ethan's hand. "Confidential records. Who authorized you to dig around here, Harrington? I might have to report you for breaching privacy laws. That won't look good for your precious conglomerate." James took a step forward. "Don't try twisting this. We have proof you've been siphoning money from the pediatric department for months, maybe longer. Enough to put you behind bars if the authorities see it." Travis's calm facade cracked for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "It's your word against mine. And if this does get out, the hospital's reputation will be in tatters. Imagine the headlines. Scandal at Harrington's hospital. Funds missing in corruption scheme. Patients start going elsewhere. Lives are lost because the donations dry up. Is that really what you want? Ethan's pulse pounded with anger. He held up the envelope. We have everything we need to blow your operation wide open, but we don't want to destroy this hospital. We want you to back off, leave the CEO position alone, leave Mia Carter alone, and end your sabotage. Travis gave a short, humorless laugh. You think I'll just surrender because you found some documents in a dusty old box? You underestimate my reach, Harrington. I have more allies than you realize. And your personal situation with Dr. Carter? That's a lovely story for the tabloids, should it leak. Imagine how quickly you'll lose board support when they find out you're playing house with the new chief of pediatrics, who's already set to go on medical leave. The board hates a scandal more than you know. Ethan's eyes flashed. You leave Mia out of this. Then it's your move. Travis glanced at the men behind him. One of them stepped forward, as though ready to grab Ethan or James if they tried to leave. Tension crackled in the air. Before anyone could speak, a faint shuffle drew their attention toward the far end of the aisle. Mia appeared, leaning on the metal shelf for balance, her expression determined despite the weariness in her eyes. Lucy stood at her side, an arm around Mia's waist in case she needed support. They'd come down, likely alerted by James's prolonged absence and Ethan's disappearance, to ensure that Travis couldn't act unchecked. Mia, what are you doing here? Ethan asked, voice tight with concern. You should be resting. She steadied her breathing, pressing a hand to her abdomen. I couldn't just sit there, not while Travis threatened to ruin everything. This hospital is my life's work, and we're not letting him tear it apart. Travis snorted. You should have stayed in bed, Dr. Carter. Stress isn't good for pregnant women, especially those carrying quadruplets. The way he said it sounded like a threat, his grin chilling. If you keep poking your nose into matters that don't concern you, you might end up in worse shape than you realize. Lucy bristled. Her health is none of your business, Caldwell. A flicker of frustration twisted Travis's mouth. Everything is my business if it concerns Harrington's empire. You might be the new chief of pediatrics, Dr. Carter, but that can change in an instant if I have my way. Ethan clenched the envelope of evidence. You can't keep blackmailing us. We have your fraudulent accounts, all the missing money. You'll be lucky if you don't face criminal charges. Travis lifted a folder from a nearby stack, flipping it open to show blank pages. Well, seems you've got the upper hand, Harrington. Unless we have a little accident, and those files catch fire or end up shredded. This hospital can be quite drafty at night. James tensed, drawing a phone from his pocket. Already backed up the data, Travis. Digital copies exist. Destroying these papers won't stop the truth. Travis's steely gaze hovered on James. For a moment, no one spoke. Tension coiled around them like a tightened spring ready to snap. Mia shifted her weight, letting Lucy support her. Every breath she took felt like a spark in the charged air. Finally, with a sneer, Travis slammed the folder onto a nearby cart. You're so certain you hold all the cards, but if you go public, you drag the hospital through the mud. Your precious philanthropic brand collapses. Mia loses her job. Patients suffer when donors scatter. Think carefully before you try to ruin me because you'll take yourselves down too. A sudden wave of pain crossed Mia's features. Lucy immediately steadied her. Ethan started to move toward her, but one of Travis's men stepped in his path, blocking him. Fury built in Ethan's chest. He glanced at Mia's tense face, then at Travis's smug expression. Step aside, Ethan warned the guard. The man hesitated, as if waiting for a signal from Travis. Travis let out a cold chuckle, lifting a hand for his security to stand down. No need for force tonight. After all, we're not savages. But I think our conversation is over. Ethan's voice dropped, charged with a promise. We're not done, Caldwell. You can't blackmail us forever. Travis shot him a final, calculating glance, then turned his attention to Mia. Dr. Carter, he said, voice dripping with false politeness. "You should be more careful in your condition. Make sure you get some rest." Mia swallowed, refusing to wilt under his stare. "You might control the board for now, but you won't control this hospital's future forever." A dark satisfaction flickered in Travis's eyes. He turned on his heel, signaling his men to follow. They slipped out of the records room, footsteps echoing until they faded into the corridor beyond. In the stillness left behind, Mia let out a shaky breath. The tension in her body threatened to overwhelm her, and Lucy guided her to a small stool so she could sit. James carefully tucked the files back into the envelope. Ethan gripped the edge of the nearest shelf, knuckles white, mind churning with how close they'd come to losing the evidence. At last, Travis's parting words reverberated in the near silence, heavy with menace. "You expose me. You destroy yourselves. And her. Think carefully." Morning light filtered through the hospital blinds, illuminating Mia's pale face. She lay in a private maternity room, monitors quietly beeping around her. Lucy stood by her side, adjusting an IV drip, while Ethan hovered at the foot of the bed, his eyes shadowed by worry. Mia had spent the night enduring escalating pains, her body teetering on the edge of early labor. "How are you feeling?" Ethan asked gently, stepping closer. Mia met his gaze, her brow knit with fatigue. "Like I'm about to run a marathon I haven't trained for," she said, trying to manage a wry smile. She rested a hand over her abdomen. "I don't think the babies are willing to wait much longer." Lucy gave a small nod, her voice calm yet urgent. "We need to prepare for a possible preterm delivery, Mia. I'll call Dr. Rawlings so she can be on standby. You've made it this far, but quadruplet pregnancies can shift overnight." Mia exhaled shakily. She was scared, but also comforted by the presence of these two people who meant so much to her. A few hours ago, the tension had revolved around Travis's threats. Now, the immediate worry was the safe delivery of 4 tiny lives. Ethan slipped a hand into hers, leaning in. "We'll do whatever it takes to keep you and the babies safe, I promise." His voice caught on the last words, and she squeezed his fingers. They both knew that Travis was out there, still capable of attempting a final strike. But for the moment, the babies took precedence. Lucy stepped outside, returning minutes later with Dr. Rawlings, who carefully examined Mia. "Her contractions are close," Dr. Rawlings murmured. "We'll move her to an operating room if the babies decide to come. Let's keep a close watch." As they prepared, Ethan's phone vibrated. He glanced down, brow furrowing when he read James's message. "Board meeting rescheduled for midday. Travis on the attack. If you want to keep your position, we need the evidence now." He looked torn, standing at Mia's bedside. She noticed the worry etched on his face. "Go," she whispered. "You have to show the board the truth about Travis. Otherwise, what's to stop him from cutting the hospital's funding if he wins?" Ethan hesitated, torn between corporate warfare and the imminent birth of his children. Lucy caught his eye, her expression firm. "You can come right back. We'll make sure Mia's okay. We need you to protect this hospital too." Finally, he nodded. With a kiss on Mia's forehead, he hurried out. Mia forced herself to breathe. She trusted Ethan to handle Travis, and she trusted Lucy and Dr. Rawlings to guide her if the babies arrived suddenly. Moments later, the hospital staff prepared her for a potential C-section. The wards bustled with subdued urgency, a specialized neonatal team on standby. Mia's contractions grew more intense, stealing her breath in waves. She clutched the rails of the bed, sweat beading on her forehead, fear and resolve clashing inside her. Meanwhile, upstairs, Ethan and James stepped into a large boardroom. Various board members sat around a polished table, tense expressions revealing that Travis had been busy whispering in their ears. Travis himself lounged at the head of the table, a victorious glint in his eyes. "You're late," Travis said, tapping a pen against a file. "We were about to proceed with the vote." Ethan laid a folder of documents before the board, ignoring Travis's jab. "Before you vote, I have evidence showing a pattern of embezzlement tied directly to Travis Caldwell," he said, voice steady. The board members leaned in, curiosity and shock mingling in their faces. Funds meant for the pediatric department were siphoned into his personal accounts. Here are the transaction logs, the wire transfers, and the shell companies he used. A hush descended as they flipped through the folder. Travis clenched his jaw, but forced a dismissive laugh. What a stunt! False accusations, no doubt fabricated by Harrington to save his seat. James stepped forward. Not fabricated. We've had experts verify these findings. If you dispute them, we can bring in law enforcement. A flicker of panic crossed Travis's features. He glared at Ethan. You'd torpedo this hospital's reputation just to keep your throne? Ethan's gaze never wavered. Your corruption is what puts the hospital in danger, not the truth. He glanced around at the board members, who exchanged troubled looks. I love this place too much to let it be run by someone who steals from the patients. I won't allow it. The board erupted in murmurs, some demanding to see more evidence, others eyeing Travis with new suspicion. Sensing the shift, Travis stood abruptly, his voice rising. If you go public, you'll destroy everything. Investors will pull out. The hospital will crumble. Think carefully. An older board member shook her head. You put us at risk, Travis. We can't ignore this. She turned to Ethan. We need a plan. If these allegations are valid, Mr. Caldwell can't remain in any position of power. Ethan nodded. I propose immediate suspension of Travis Caldwell from all board activities, pending a thorough investigation. We can handle this internally first, assuming he cooperates. If he refuses, we'll follow through with law enforcement. We can't brush aside theft. A heated debate followed, board members trying to grasp the gravity of the scandal. Travis made a last, desperate attempt to sway them, promising that exposing him would drag the hospital into the mud. But, faced with undeniable documents, many saw no other way. They voted to remove him pending a deeper review, effectively stripping him of his influence. The room crackled with tension as Travis packed up his papers. He shot Ethan a venomous look. You'll regret this, Harrington. Mark my words. Ethan didn't flinch. Get out, Travis, before we call security. With one final glare, Travis stormed from the boardroom, leaving the shaken executives behind. A tired hush followed. Several board members thanked Ethan and James, relief mingling with shock. Ethan wasted no time. He needed to get back to Mia. After confirming the hospital's philanthropic funding would proceed with caution but remain intact, he rushed out of the building, phone in hand, calling Lucy for updates. Downstairs, Lucy stood watch as Mia's condition intensified. The babies were coming sooner than expected. Medical staff moved swiftly to prepare the operating room. Mia's breath came in ragged gasps, the pressure in her abdomen nearly overwhelming. She clung to Lucy's hand, tears pricking her eyes. I'm here, Lucy kept repeating. Just focus on breathing. We're ready for a C-section if it goes that way. When Ethan arrived, face flushed from running through corridors, he found Mia already being wheeled into the operating theater. He shed his jacket, sanitized his hands, and quickly donned scrubs so he could stand by her side. She reached for him, relief flickering in her gaze, though she was visibly exhausted. Did you stop Travis? She managed between contractions. He nodded, leaning close so she could hear over the bustle of the medical team. He's suspended. We have enough to remove him from power. The board's on our side now. Tears welled in Mia's eyes, but there was no time to dwell. The obstetrics team administered anesthesia, shifting into urgent precision. Nurses arranged surgical drapes while Dr. Rawlings, masked and focused, prepared for the procedure. Ethan held Mia's hand, whispering reassurances as her eyes flickered with a mix of fear and fierce determination. The minutes blurred. Bright overhead lights reflected on stainless steel tools. The steady beep of monitors synced with Mia's heartbeat. Her grip on Ethan's hand tightened when the incision began. Although the anesthesia dulled her pain, She felt pressure and tugging sensations that made her tremble. One by one, the babies arrived, each tiny cry a fragile miracle. 2 boys, 2 girls. The surgical team whisked them across the room to the neonatal station, where a cluster of pediatric specialists hovered. Each newborn received immediate care, breathing support, a quick check of vitals. Mia craned her neck, tears streaming silently as she caught glimpses of their small, moving limbs. Ethan felt his heart lurch at the sight. He counted each cry, each precious heartbeat. In that moment, all the stress of the boardroom, the scandal with Travis, and the corporate battles seemed to fade. The future narrowed down to the 4 tiny lives just brought into the world. "They're early," Dr. Rawlings said softly, "but they're stable. We'll keep them in the NICU for close monitoring." Mia smiled through her tears, relief flooding her exhausted body. As the medical team began closing the incision, Ethan brushed hair away from Mia's damp forehead, pressing a gentle kiss there. She clung to him, laughter and sobs mixing into a single breath of gratitude. Later that evening, once Mia was settled in a recovery room, Ethan guided her down a quiet hallway to the NICU. She was in a wheelchair, weak but determined to see the babies properly. Through the glass, they spotted 4 incubators in a row, each holding a tiny, swaddled figure. The machines beeped rhythmically, tubes and wires ensuring each infant received the best possible care. Mia couldn't hold back fresh tears. "They're so small," she whispered, overwhelmed by a fierce protective love. "But they're okay, right?" A neonatal nurse in pastel scrubs nodded kindly. "They're strong, Dr. Carter. All 4 are breathing on their own, though they'll need extra support for a while. They're in good hands." Ethan slipped an arm around Mia's shoulders. "We've been through a lot, but seeing them like this makes everything worth it." Lucy arrived with James, who carried a bouquet of cheerful flowers and a grin across his face. "Congratulations, you 2, James said softly. "They're beautiful." Mia managed a watery laugh, feeling a warm camaraderie in the air. Outside these walls, the press might speculate on hospital affairs and Travis might still harbor resentment. But in this small space, there was only the shared joy of 4 newborns who had somehow arrived safely despite all the turmoil. In the following days, the hospital's official statement condemned Travis Caldwell's actions, explaining that an internal review had removed him from power. The board, swayed by Ethan's evidence, vowed to protect the pediatric department's funding. Public outcry against Travis faded as soon as journalists uncovered his corruption, sealing his fate. Meanwhile, Mia's promotion stayed intact, hospital administrators recognizing her as a vital leader, even if she would spend the coming months balancing motherhood and medical responsibilities. Days after the baby's birth, Mia found a moment of stillness in the NICU. She wore a sterile gown and gently cradled one of the newborns, her tiny daughter, while Ethan held a son in his arms, the other 2 sleeping peacefully in their incubators. Soft lullabies played overhead, mingling with the hum of ventilators. "This is our new world," Mia murmured, looking from the babies to Ethan. Emotion wove through her words. "I can't believe we made it here." Ethan pressed his lips to her temple. "I'm grateful for every second. They'll grow stronger every day, and we'll figure out the rest, together." He paused, a hopeful smile lifting his voice. "Maybe once they're all healthy enough we can celebrate properly. A small ceremony to mark us." A surge of warmth filled Mia's chest. She nodded slowly. "I'd like that," she whispered. "I'd like that a lot." Lucy and James stood by the glass, watching with quiet smiles. The storm had passed, leaving a sense of renewal in its wake. Mia and Ethan had uncovered corruption, defended their integrity, and ushered 4 delicate lives into the world. Their family was just beginning, and so was a future they could shape for themselves. At last, Ethan turned to Mia with a grin, his gaze drifting to the babies. "We have so many adventures ahead," he said softly. "So many firsts." Mia's heart thumped, remembering the battles they'd fought and the fragile miracles now breathing in their arms. For the first time in a long while, she felt pure hope for whatever lay beyond these hospital walls. They were free to move forward, together, as a family. Before leaving the NICU, Ethan leans in and whispers, "Our real adventure begins now. 5 hearts beating as one." If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.